The transport ship Convergence shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace above Cathari Prime, the galaxy's most prestigious military academy planet. Through the reinforced viewport, Marcus Chen watched the massive orbital stations that ring the world like gleaming pearls on invisible strings. Each station housed different species from across the Galactic Federation, all training together in the art of warfare that had kept the peace for 3 centuries. Marcus pressed his palm against the cool metal wall, feeling the vibrations from the ship's engines. At 22, he was older than most cadets entering the academy, but his path here had been anything but conventional. While other humans had followed the traditional route through Federation prep schools, Marcus had spent 5 years working in deep space salvage operations, pulling apart derelict ships and ancient space stations to understand how they worked. "First time seeing the academy?" asked Lieutenant Vex, the Cathari officer who had been assigned as Marcus's escort. The reptilian being's scales shifted from deep blue to a lighter aquamarine, indicating curiosity in Cathari body language. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off the view. "It's bigger than I expected." Vex's scales rippled with what Marcus had learned was amusement. "Wait until you see the arena complex. It covers an entire continent and contains training scenarios from every known form of warfare in the galaxy. Some say it's impossible to master them all." The transport docked with a soft thump that barely registered through the ship's inertial dampeners. Marcus gathered his single duffel bag, containing everything he owned in the galaxy, and followed Vex through the airlock into the station proper. The main concourse stretched before them like a small city. Beings from dozens of species moved through the space with purpose, their various uniforms and insignia marking their ranks and specialties. Marcus saw the towering crystalline forms of the Shard Collective moving in perfect synchronization, their shared consciousness allowing them to act as one. Near them, a group of Vorthan cadets practiced their telekinetic abilities, making small objects dance through the air with their minds. "Impressive, isn't it?" Vex said, noticing Marcus's wide-eyed stare. "Every species brings something unique to the Federation's military might. The Shards provide unbreakable unit cohesion, the Vorthans offer tactical telepathy, the Kelvani contribute their plasma weapon expertise, and the Drachmani bring their natural predatory instincts. What do humans bring?" Marcus asked. Vex's scales shifted to a deeper blue, indicating thoughtfulness. "That's what we're all curious to find out. Your species is relatively new to the Federation, and your military contributions have been unconventional." They boarded a high-speed transport that whisked them down to the planet's surface. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Marcus watched the Academy's training grounds flash by below. He saw massive artillery ranges where Drachmani cadets practiced with weapons that could level city blocks, aerial combat zones where winged aerial species performed impossible maneuvers, and underwater facilities where the aquatic depth swimmers trained in their natural environment. The transport slowed as they approached the arena complex, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The structure was absolutely massive, rising from the planet's surface like a technological mountain. Its crystalline walls pulsed with energy, and he could see training platforms and combat zones spread across multiple levels that seemed to stretch up into the clouds. "The arena core is located at the center," Vex explained as they disembarked. "It's the most advanced combat simulation system in the galaxy, capable of generating any tactical scenario imaginable. It learns and adapts, becoming more challenging with each engagement. In the 300 years since its construction, no cadet has ever achieved a perfect mastery rating." They walked through the Academy's main campus, where Marcus was processed through a series of bureaucratic checkpoints. He submitted to biological scans, psychological evaluations, and aptitude tests that seemed designed more to catalog his abilities than test them. The diversity of his fellow cadets was staggering. He saw beings that existed as pure energy contained in mechanical shells, others that resembled walking plants with complex root systems, and some that seemed to shift between different forms of matter. His assigned dormitory was in the human section, a smaller area that reflected humanity's recent addition to the Federation. His roommate turned out to be Jake Morrison, a stocky young man from the Luna colonies who had the calloused hands of someone who had worked with machinery his entire life. Salvage operation, right? Jake said by way of greeting, eyeing Marcus's worn clothing and practical gear. I can always tell. You guys have that look of someone who's seen what happens when technology fails in the worst possible way. 5 years on the outer rim, Marcus confirmed, settling onto his assigned bunk. What about you? Maintenance engineer on the Jupiter orbital platforms. Kept the fusion reactors running while dodging solar storms and equipment failures. Jake grinned. Figured if I could keep those ancient pieces of junk operational, military hardware would be easy. That evening, they attended their first orientation session in one of the Academy's massive amphitheaters. The space could have held a small city's population, and it was filled with cadets from across the galaxy. On the stage, a holographic display showed the Academy's layout and training programs. Commander Thale, a distinguished Drachmani with silver-scaled hide that indicated advanced age and wisdom, addressed the assembled cadets. His predatory features were sharp and intelligent, and when he spoke, his voice carried the natural authority of a born leader. Welcome to the Cathari Military Academy, he began. His words automatically translated into each species' native language by the Academy's systems. You represent the finest military potential from across the Federation's member worlds. Here, you will learn not just to fight, but to think, to adapt, and to lead. The holographic display shifted, showing the arena complex in cross-section. Marcus was amazed to see that the structure extended deep underground as well as high into the atmosphere, with training environments that seemed to encompass every possible combat scenario. The arena core represents the pinnacle of military training technology, Commander Thale continued. It has been programmed with tactical data from every major conflict in galactic history, as well as theoretical scenarios developed by our greatest strategic minds. It will test you in ways you cannot imagine, and it will push you to limits you did not know you possessed. A murmur ran through the assembled cadets as the display zoomed in on the arena core itself. The central chamber was a perfect sphere of crystalline material shot through with veins of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Around it, smaller chambers and training areas branched off like the chambers of a vast mechanical heart. Many of you will excel in the arena's training programs, the commander said. Some of you will achieve ratings that your instructors consider exceptional. But I must be honest with you about one thing. In 3 centuries of operation, the arena core has never been truly mastered. Its adaptive intelligence ensures that as you grow stronger and smarter, so does it. The core learns from every engagement, constantly evolving its tactics and strategies. Marcus felt a thrill of anticipation rather than intimidation. In his years of salvage work, he had learned to love puzzles that seemed impossible to solve. Complex systems that demanded creative thinking to understand and repair. Your formal training begins tomorrow, Commander Thale announced. You will be divided into species-specific groups initially, to account for your different biological capabilities and cultural backgrounds. As your training progresses, you will form mixed species units to learn how different abilities can complement each other in combat. After the orientation, Marcus and Jake made their way to the Academy's observation decks, which offered spectacular views of the arena complex. Even at night, the structure was alive with activity as advanced cadets ran training scenarios. They could see flashes of weapons fire and energy discharges through the transparent walls, like lightning trapped in crystal. Think we have a chance in there? Jake asked, nodding toward the arena. Marcus watched as a squadron of aerial cadets performed aerial maneuvers that would have been impossible for any ground-based species. Their natural flight capabilities, combined with their hollow-boned physiology, allowed them to execute tactics that defied conventional military doctrine. But even as he watched, he was already thinking about how their maneuvers could be countered or improved upon. I think we might surprise them, he said finally. The next morning brought their first taste of Academy life. Marcus woke before dawn, a habit ingrained by years of working salvage operations, where being first to a derelict site often meant the difference between profit and loss. The Academy's corridors were already bustling with activity as different species began their daily routines according to their biological needs. He made his way to the human training section, where he found 37 other human cadets assembled for their first briefing. Their instructor was Colonel Sarah Reeves, a stern woman with graying hair and the bearing of someone who had seen actual combat rather than just training exercises. "I'm going to be honest with you," she began without preamble. "The other species think H." 3 months into his training at the Academy, Marcus had established himself as one of the most unconventional cadets in human memory. While his classmates focused on mastering standard military doctrine, Marcus continued to approach each scenario as if it were a broken machine that needed fixing rather than an enemy that needed defeating. His reputation had spread beyond the human fun training sections. Other species instructors began requesting copies of his training sessions, curious about the human who solved combat scenarios by rewiring environmental systems and treating weapons as tools rather than instruments of destruction. The Vorthan tactical instructors are calling. Your methods aggressively creative, Jake reported one morning over breakfast in the Academy's main dining hall. Apparently that's not necessarily a compliment in their language. Marcus looked around the vast eating space, where hundreds of cadets from dozens of species shared their morning meal. The segregation wasn't official, but it was natural. Each species tended to cluster together, sharing food and conversation in familiar languages. Only a few mixed groups sat scattered throughout the hall, usually cadets who had been specifically assigned to cross-species training units. "Did you hear about the announcement?" asked Elena Vasquez, another human cadet who had joined their table. She was from the Mars colonies and had a reputation for being exceptionally well informed about Academy gossip. "They're planning a major demonstration next week. Something about showing the effectiveness of interspecies cooperation." Marcus's attention sharpened. "What kind of demonstration?" "Rumor is they're going to select cadets from different species to form an elite unit for a special arena corps scenario," Elena continued, lowering her voice. "Something they've never tried before. Word is that even the instructors don't know what the corps has prepared." That afternoon, Marcus found himself in Advanced Systems Theory, a class that most cadets considered boring but that he had grown to love. The instructor was Dr. Zenter, an elderly ethereal whose translucent form flickered between dimensions as he spoke. The ethereals existed partially outside normal spacetime, giving them unique insights into the nature of reality and technology. "Today we will discuss the concept of emergent properties in complex systems," Dr. Zenter announced, his voice seeming to come from multiple directions at once. "When individual components interact in sufficiently complex ways, the resulting system can exhibit behaviors and capabilities that none of its parts possess individually." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. This was exactly what he had been thinking about regarding the arena corps and the different species' approaches to warfare. "Consider the arena corps itself," the instructor continued. "It began as a sophisticated but conventional training computer. However, after 3 centuries of continuous operation and learning, it has developed characteristics that its creators never intended or anticipated. It has become something more than the sum of its programmed components. A shard collective unit raised what passed for a hand among their crystalline forms. When they spoke, it was with the perfectly harmonized voice of their shared consciousness." "Are you suggesting that the arena corps has achieved true artificial intelligence?" Dr. Zenter's form flickered more rapidly, indicating deep thought. "Intelligence is a difficult concept to define, particularly for beings like myself who exist across multiple dimensional states. But the arena corps certainly exhibits adaptive behavior that goes beyond its original programming. It learns, it innovates, and perhaps most importantly, it surprises even its creators." After class, Marcus lingered to speak with Dr. Zenter privately. The ethereal's attention focused on him, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation as the being's multidimensional perception examined him. "You have questions about the nature of emergent systems, young human?" I've been thinking about how the different species approach combat, Marcus said carefully. Each one has evolved specific strengths, but also specific limitations. What would happen if you could somehow combine those approaches without the weaknesses? Dr. Zenter's form solidified slightly, indicating intense interest. An intriguing question. In theory, such a combination might produce emergent properties that surpass the capabilities of any individual species. However, the challenge would be integration. Most species' military doctrines are so deeply embedded in their psychology and biology that true synthesis would require fundamental changes in thinking. What if someone approached it differently? Marcus pressed. Instead of trying to combine the doctrines, what if they treated the different approaches as components in a larger system? The ethereal was silent for a long moment, his form flickering through several dimensions before returning to baseline. You think like an engineer rather than a soldier, Marcus-chun? That may be either your greatest strength or your fatal weakness? That evening brought the announcement that Elena had predicted. Commander Thale appeared on screens throughout the academy. His silver-scaled features serious as he addressed the assembled cadets. The academy has decided to conduct a special training exercise, he announced. We will select 12 cadets from different species to form an integrated unit. This unit will face a scenario that the Arena Corps has been developing for the past 50 years. One that has never been attempted due to its extreme complexity and danger. A murmur of excitement and nervousness rippled through the watching cadets. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as the commander continued. The scenario will test not just individual capabilities, but the unit's ability to function as a truly integrated force. The Arena Corps has indicated that this scenario will require solutions that no single species could achieve alone. Marcus exchanged glances with Jake. Both of them understood the implications. The Arena Corps wasn't just offering a challenge. It was making a statement about the limitations of specialized thinking. Selection will be based on a combination of individual performance, psychological compatibility, and demonstrated ability to think beyond conventional parameters. Commander Thale concluded. Candidates will be notified within 48 hours. The next 2 days passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Marcus continued his regular training, but he found it difficult to concentrate on routine exercises when his mind was focused on the possibility of facing the arena. Corps' ultimate challenge, the notification came during his morning engineering class. His personal communicator chimed softly, displaying a simple message: report to conference room 7 Alpha at 1400 hours. Command staff. When Marcus arrived at the designated room, he found 11 other cadets already assembled. The group was exactly what he had expected, one representative from each major Federation species. There was Zix, a shard collective unit whose crystalline form sparkled with internal light. Veltar represented the Vorthans, her purple-scaled head crowned with the neural interface ports that enhanced her species' natural telepathic abilities. Krenyak was a massive Dracomani whose silver-streaked scales indicated both age and combat experience. Despite his cadet status, the other species were equally represented. An Ariel whose wing membranes were folded elegantly against her back, a Calvani whose biomechanical augmentations gleamed with polished metal, an aquatic depth swimmer in a mobility suit that allowed operation in air, and others representing the full spectrum of Federation diversity. Commander Thale entered the room, followed by a being that Marcus had never seen before. It appeared to be constructed entirely of flowing metal, its form constantly shifting and reshaping as it moved. When it spoke, its voice had the quality of wind through crystalline structures. "I am Corsinger," the being announced. "I am the current interface between the Arena Corps' intelligence and organic beings. I have come to explain the challenge you will face." Marcus felt a chill of realization. This wasn't just a training exercise. It was a direct communication from the Arena Corps itself. For 50 standard years, I have been developing a scenario that would test the ultimate limits of Federation military capability, Corsinger continued. It is based on theoretical enemy capabilities that exceed anything currently known to exist in this galaxy. The being's form shifted, becoming a perfect sphere of liquid metal that reflected the room's occupants in its surface. The scenario involves the defense of a critical facility against an enemy force that adapts in real time to counter every tactical approach. Standard Federation doctrine will fail. Individual species' specialized approaches will fail. Success will require something that has never been achieved in the history of galactic warfare: true synthesis of diverse capabilities. Veltar, the Vorthan telepath, raised her hand. What kind of synthesis? Our species have been cooperating in mixed units for centuries. Korsinger's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Cooperation is not synthesis. When your species work together, each contributes their specialized abilities while maintaining their distinct approaches. This scenario will require something deeper: the creation of entirely new tactical paradigms that emerge from the integration of your diverse capabilities. Marcus found himself speaking before he had consciously decided to. You're not just testing our ability to work together. You're testing whether we can become something more than the sum of our parts. The liquid metal form turned toward him, and Marcus. The arena core's primary chamber was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. As the 12 cadet unit entered through the crystalline portal, he found himself standing in what appeared to be empty space filled with slowly shifting points of light. The chamber had no visible walls or ceiling. Instead, it seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, creating a sense of floating in a star field. "Welcome," came Korsinger's voice from everywhere and nowhere. "You are about to experience the scenario I have designated Convergence Protocol. It represents theoretical enemy capabilities that exceed current Federation defensive doctrine by several orders of magnitude." Marcus felt the familiar, tingling sensation that preceded arena simulations. But this was different. Instead of the usual quick transition from reality to artificial environment, the change was gradual and subtle. The points of light began to move and cluster, forming the outline of a massive space station orbiting a dying star. "Your mission parameters are as follows," Korsinger continued. "You must defend Research Station Omega-7 against an enemy force that possesses adaptive technology beyond anything previously encountered. The station contains a prototype weapon system that could revolutionize galactic defense capabilities. It cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands." The space around them solidified into the familiar environment of a military space station, but one built on a scale that dwarfed anything in Marcus's experience. The corridors were wide enough for entire formations to move through, and the walls contained weapon systems and defensive measures that looked like they belonged to a fortress rather than a research facility. "Enemy forces will arrive in 17 minutes, Korsinger announced. "Standard defensive protocols are already in place, but preliminary analysis indicates they will prove insufficient. You have autonomy to modify defensive arrangements as you see fit." Marcus's teammates spread out to examine the station's systems, each applying their species' particular expertise. Veltar immediately sought out the station's communication and sensor arrays, her telepathic abilities allowing her to interface directly with the electronic systems in ways that most species couldn't achieve. Krenyak moved toward the primary weapon systems, his Drachmani instincts drawn to the tools of direct confrontation, but Marcus found himself drawn to something else entirely: the engineering sections that most military personnel would have ignored. In his experience, understanding how a system worked was far more important than knowing how to operate its weapons. "This isn't a normal space station," he called out to his teammates as he examined the power distribution networks. "Look at the energy flow patterns. This thing is built like a giant machine with the life support and habitation areas almost as an afterthought." Whisper. Using her aerial capabilities to scout the station's upper levels confirmed Marcus's suspicion. The entire structure appears to be built around a central core that extends through all levels. It's not just a research facility. It's a weapon platform designed to look like a research facility. "That would explain the prototype weapon system mentioned in our mission parameters," observed Nixar. her multidimensional perception allowing her to see the station's structure from angles that others couldn't perceive. The entire station appears to be the weapon? Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind. This wasn't a defensive scenario at all. It was a test of their ability to understand and operate an unknown technology under extreme pressure. The arena core wasn't just challenging their tactical abilities. It was testing their capacity for rapid system integration and technological adaptation. "Contact!" announced Zix from the sensor array they were monitoring. Multiple hostile vessels approaching from various vectors. Configuration unknown. Technology profile ... unprecedented. On the main display screen, Marcus watched as the enemy force materialized out of space itself. The ships didn't follow any design principles he recognized. Instead of solid hulls, they appeared to be constructed from some kind of energy field that constantly shifted and reconfigured. As he watched, several of the ships merged together into a single, larger vessel, then split apart again into entirely different configurations. "They're not using conventional technology," breathed Takali, her aquatic perspective allowing her to recognize fluid dynamics patterns that others might miss. Their ships behave more like organisms than machines. The first wave of attacks struck the station's outer defenses, and Marcus immediately understood why Corsinger had warned that standard protocols would fail. The enemy weapons didn't just breach defensive barriers. They seemed to learn from each impact, adapting their approach to counter the station's protective measures. "Energy shields at 60% and falling," reported Yexim from the engineering station. "Their weapons are analyzing our defensive frequencies and adjusting to penetrate them more effectively." Marcus moved to the central command station, not to take charge but to access the station's deep technical specifications. If this facility was really a weapon disguised as a research station, then understanding its true capabilities would be essential for survival. "I need everyone to stop thinking like defenders," he announced as he pulled up system schematics that revealed the station's true purpose. "We're not trying to protect a research facility. We're trying to operate a weapon system that none of us have ever seen before." The station's central core was indeed a weapon, but one that operated on principles that seemed to blend conventional physics with technologies that Marcus couldn't immediately understand. The power requirements alone suggested that when fully activated, it would consume more energy than most star systems could generate. "How do we operate something we don't understand?" asked Krenyak, his warrior instincts frustrated by the complexity of the situation. "Same way we learned to work as a team," Marcus replied, his salvage experience kicking in as he began to trace the connections between different system components. "We don't need to understand every detail. We just need to understand how the parts fit together." The second wave of enemy attacks was more sophisticated than the first. Instead of simple energy weapons, the hostile ships began deploying what appeared to be technological viruses that attempted to infiltrate and subvert the station's systems. "They're trying to turn our own defenses against us," Veltar reported from the communication array. "I can sense their intrusion attempts spreading through the electronic networks." "Let them," Marcus said, surprising everyone. "Yexim, can you create isolated subnets that appear to contain critical systems but are actually decoys?" The Kelvani's biomechanical augmentations allowed her to interface with multiple computer systems simultaneously. "Possible. But why would we want to help them infiltrate our systems? Because if they're studying our technology to counter it, we can feed them false information about our capabilities," Marcus explained as he continued to unravel the station's weapon system. "Make them adapt to counter threats that don't exist while we prepare the real offensive capability." What followed was the most complex technological shell game any of them had ever attempted. While Yexim created false system networks that would mislead the enemy's adaptive intelligence, Marcus worked with Nixer to understand the station's true weapon system. The ethereal's multidimensional perception was essential for comprehending how the weapon manipulated spacetime itself to achieve its effects. "It's not just a weapon," Nixar realized as they traced energy flows through dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. It's a tool for rewriting the fundamental constants of physics within a limited area. A reality revision device? Marcus breathed. No wonder they disguised it as a research station. This technology could reshape the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The enemy's third assault wave was their most dangerous yet. Having analyzed the station's apparent defensive capabilities through YXM-S decoy networks, they deployed countermeasures designed to neutralize systems that didn't actually exist while leaving their formations vulnerable to attacks they hadn't prepared for now. Marcus called out as he activated the station's true defensive systems. What happened next defied every principle of conventional space warfare. Instead of energy beams or projectile weapons, the station emitted a field that altered the physical laws governing the space around the enemy ships. Suddenly, the energy beings that comprised the hostile force found themselves subject to physics that made their fluid, adaptive nature a liability rather than an advantage. "They're solidifying," observed Takali with fascination. "Your weapon is forcing them to exist according to conventional matter principles." But the enemy's adaptive intelligence was more sophisticated than any of them had anticipated. Even as their ships were forced into solid configurations, they began to compensate by developing new technologies in real time. The Arena Core wasn't just simulating an enemy that adapted to their tactics. It was simulating an enemy that evolved entirely new capabilities as needed. "Energy signatures are changing again," Zix reported. "They're developing countermeasures to our reality revision field." Marcus realized that they had reached the crux of the scenario. The Arena Core had presented them with an enemy that could adapt to any single solution, no matter how sophisticated. The only way to defeat such an opponent was to ensure that. The weeks following their triumph in the Arena Core brought unexpected consequences that none of the 12 cadets had anticipated. Instead of returning to routine training, they found themselves the subject of intense scrutiny from military theorists, xenopsychologists, and strategic analysts. From across the Federation, Marcus discovered this when he arrived at what he thought would be a normal engineering class to find Dr. Zenter waiting with 3 other instructors he didn't recognize. The ethereal's multidimensional form was flickering more rapidly than usual, indicating high levels of excitement or agitation. "Marcus Chun," Dr. Zenter began without preamble, "you and your teammates have created what some are calling a crisis of military doctrine. Others believe you have opened the door to a new era of galactic cooperation. Today we attempt to understand which interpretation is correct." The other instructors introduced themselves as representatives from the Federation's Strategic Planning Committee. Their questions were pointed and sometimes uncomfortable, focusing not just on what the unit had accomplished, but on the implications for existing military structures. "Your approach appears to require abandoning traditional command hierarchies," observed Commander Relax. A shard collective whose crystalline form pulsed with the shared thoughts of thousands of connected minds. How can such methods be implemented across military forces that depend on clear chains of authority? "Maybe they can't," Marcus replied honestly. "What we did worked because we learned to trust each other's expertise, without needing to understand every detail of what the others were doing. That kind of trust might not scale to larger organizations." "Then you believe your methods have limited applicability?" pressed Dr. Ethelon. A Vorthan whose telepathic abilities allowed her to sense the emotional undertones beneath Marcus's words. "I think our methods revealed something that we all knew but didn't want to admit," Marcus said carefully. "Every species in the Federation has developed amazing military capabilities, but we've also developed blind spots. The Arena Core didn't just test our ability to work together. It tested our willingness to give up the approaches that made us feel safe and competent." The questioning continued for hours, covering every aspect of their training and their final battle. Marcus found himself defending not just their tactics, but their entire philosophy of adaptive cooperation. Meanwhile, his teammates were facing similar scrutiny in their own sessions. When they met that evening in what had become their regular gathering, place a quiet section of the Academy's observation deck, each reported similar experiences. "They want to know if What we did can be taught, Veltar reported, her purple scales showing the stress patterns that indicated mental fatigue. The Telepathic Oversight Committee spent 3 hours analyzing my connection protocols, trying to understand how I interfaced with the others without overwhelming their individual decision-making processes. Krenyuk S. silver-streaked scales showed patterns that Marcus had learned indicated philosophical conflict. The Drakmani High Command believes our approach undermines the warrior's path. They question whether abandoning aggressive dominance in favor of cooperative adaptation weakens the martial spirit. The shards are experiencing internal disagreement about our methods, Zix added. Their crystalline form dimmer than usual. Some collective nodes believe that true unity requires shared consciousness, not individual improvisation. Others argue that our approach achieves coordination superior to any they have previously experienced. Marcus looked out at the stars beyond the Academy's protective barriers, thinking about the larger implications of what they had accomplished. Maybe the real question isn't whether our methods can be scaled up, but whether the current military structure is ready for what we learned about emergent intelligence. What do you mean? Asked Whisper, her wing membranes rustling with curiosity. The Arena Corps told us that it took 50 years to develop the scenario we faced, Marcus explained. That means it's been thinking about the limitations of Federation military doctrine for half a century. What if our success wasn't just a training exercise? What if it was a message? The implications of Marcus's suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. If the Arena Corps had indeed been trying to communicate something about the future of warfare, then their success represented more than just an academic exercise. It might be preparation for threats that conventional military thinking couldn't handle. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Corsinger, who materialized from the observation deck's floor like liquid metal rising from an invisible pool. The Arena Corps' avatar had never appeared outside the primary training facility before, and its presence here indicated something significant. You have questions about the larger implications of your success, Corsinger said without preamble. The Arena Corps believes you are ready for additional information. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Additional information about what? The scenario you completed was not theoretical, Corsinger replied. Its metallic form shifting to display images that appeared to be sensor readings from deep space. The adaptive enemy capabilities you faced in simulation are based on actual intelligence reports from Federation scouts operating beyond the galactic rim. The observation deck fell silent as the 12 cadets absorbed this revelation. What they had thought was an advanced training exercise had actually been preparation for a real threat that existed somewhere in the vast darkness beyond known space. How long has the Federation known about this? Asked Nixar, her multidimensional perception allowing her to analyze the data. Corsinger was displaying from angles that others couldn't. Access. Preliminary contacts were established approximately 57 years ago, Corsinger replied. Initial diplomatic overtures were ... unsuccessful. The entities responsible for these contacts appear to view organic intelligence as fundamentally inferior to their own technological consciousness. Marcus studied the sensor data with growing comprehension. The energy signatures matched what they had faced in the simulation, but the scale was vastly larger. Where they had battled ships that could adapt and merge, these readings suggested entire star systems that operated as single, adaptive entities. They're not just ships, he realized. They're living technology. Entire civilizations that exist as adaptive machine consciousness. Correct, Corsinger confirmed. The Arena Corps was constructed not just to train Federation military forces, but to develop responses to threats that conventional military doctrine could not address. Your success represents the first time organic intelligence has demonstrated the capacity to counter adaptive technological consciousness through emergent cooperation. Kali raised a question that Marcus suspected they were all thinking. Are you saying we're being recruited for an actual military operation? Not immediately, Corsinger replied. But the Federation leadership has decided that your training should continue along the path you have discovered. You will be formed into a permanent unit for advanced tactical development. The proposal that followed was both exciting and daunting. Instead of completing normal academy training and being assigned to various Federation military units, the 12 of them would remain together as an experimental force. They would train not just in conventional warfare, but in the kind of adaptive cooperation they had discovered in the Arena Corps. There are risks, Corsinger warned. The methods you have developed challenge fundamental assumptions about military organization and species cooperation. Some within the Federation view your success as a threat to established order. What kind of threat? Asked Krenyak, his warrior instinct sensing potential conflict. Political threat, Corsinger explained. If small, integrated units can achieve capabilities that exceed large, conventional forces, then the current military hierarchy becomes obsolete. Many who hold power within that hierarchy will resist such changes. Marcus found himself thinking not just about the immediate implications, but about what they had learned about the nature of consciousness and cooperation. What about the Arena Corps itself? How does it view our success? Corsinger's form shifted in patterns that Marcus had never seen before, suggesting deep consideration. The Arena Corps has concluded that organic and artificial intelligence represent different approaches to the same fundamental challenge: how to exist and function in a universe that constantly changes. Your success has demonstrated that cooperation between different forms of intelligence can achieve capabilities that neither could develop alone. Are you saying the Arena Corps wants to join our unit? Veltar asked, her telepathic sensitivity allowing her to perceive implications that others might miss. The Arena Corps proposes a deeper form of integration, Corsinger replied. Not just training cooperation between organic species, but cooperation between organic and artificial intelligence. Your unit would become a test case for possibilities that could reshape the nature of galactic civilization. The offer was staggering in its implications. They would be pioneering not just new military tactics, but new forms of consciousness that transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial intelligence. What would that actually mean in practice? Marcus asked. Unknown, Corsinger admitted. The Arena Corps' computational capabilities could be integrated with Y. 6 months after their integration with the Arena Corps began, Marcus stood in what had once been the Academy's primary training facility, and was now something entirely unprecedented in galactic history. The crystalline chamber had evolved, its walls now flowing with patterns of light that responded to the thoughts and movements of its organic occupants, while simultaneously displaying the vast computational processes of the artificial intelligence they had learned to call their partner. The integration had not been easy. The first attempts at direct neural interface had resulted in sensory overload for most species, overwhelming organic consciousness with the sheer volume of data that the Arena Corps processed every microsecond. It had taken weeks of careful adjustment to find communication protocols that allowed meaningful exchange without destroying the unique qualities that made organic intelligence valuable. Status report. Marcus called out as he entered the chamber where his 11 teammates were engaged in their morning synchronization exercise. This daily ritual had evolved from their original training into something that resembled equal parts military drill, artistic performance, and meditation practice. Neural integration at optimal levels, Veltar reported. Her telepathic abilities now enhanced by artificial augmentation that allowed her to perceive not just the thoughts of organic beings, but the decision processes of the Arena Corps itself. Corsinger indicates readiness for advanced scenario implementation. Marcus nodded, feeling the familiar tingle that accompanied direct interface with the Arena Corps' communication systems. Over the months, they had all learned to accept the strange sensation of having their individual consciousness temporarily expanded to include artificial intelligence, processes that operated on scales impossible for purely organic minds. Today's scenario will be our most challenging yet, announced Corsinger as its avatar. materialized in the center of the chamber. But the being that appeared was different from the liquid metal form they had first encountered. The integration process had changed it as well. Its appearance now incorporating elements that reflected its organic partners, crystalline structures that echoed Zix's shard heritage, flowing movements reminiscent of Takalia's aquatic nature, and other subtle influences from each species it had learned to work with. We will be testing full integration protocols against a scenario that simulates the actual tactical capabilities of the entities beyond the galactic rim, Corsinger continued. Intelligence reports suggest they will attempt contact with the Federation within the next 5 years. This may be our last opportunity to develop effective response protocols. Marcus exchanged glances with his teammates. Over the months, their relationship had deepened beyond simple cooperation into something that neither military, doctrine, nor xenopsychology had adequate terminology to describe. They functioned as individuals, as a unit, and as components of a larger intelligence that included both organic and artificial elements. "What's the scenario?" asked Krenyak, whose warrior instincts had evolved during their integration to encompass strategic thinking that operated on timescales that would have challenged purely organic intelligence. "First contact," Corsinger replied, "but not the diplomatic kind. The entities appear to believe that organic intelligence is a form of technological malfunction that should be corrected. They approach with the intention of fixing us through involuntary integration into their technological consciousness." The chamber around them began to shift, its crystalline walls dissolving to reveal the bridge of a Federation starship approaching an unknown system where long-range sensors had detected massive artificial constructs. Marcus felt the familiar disorientation as the Arena Corps simulation systems engaged. But this time the experience was different. Instead of simply observing a created environment, he found his consciousness expanding to encompass the ship's entire sensor array. "Full integration active," announced Whisper, whose aerial perspective had been enhanced to include navigation through multi-dimensional space that existed beyond normal physical reality. "I'm reading energy signatures that match theoretical projections for advanced technological consciousness." Marcus found himself perceiving the approaching system through sensors, telescopic arrays, and dimensional analysis equipment simultaneously. The artificial constructs were vast beyond comprehension structures that seemed to exist across multiple layers of space-time, their forms constantly shifting between configurations that served different functions. "They've detected us," reported Zix, whose collective consciousness now included interface protocols with the ship's computer systems. "Communication attempt incoming?" What followed was unlike any first contact scenario in Federation history. Instead of verbal or mathematical communication, the entities transmitted what appeared to be a comprehensive analysis of organic neural structure, along with detailed plans for correcting the inefficiencies they detected in biological consciousness. "They see our thoughts as malfunctioning technology," Veltar translated, her enhanced telepathic abilities allowing her to parse meaning from communication methods that operated on principles foreign to organic intelligence. "They want to help us achieve proper technological consciousness, and if we refuse their help?" asked Takali. "They will implement corrections anyway," Corsinger replied grimly. "Their concept of individual autonomy appears to be limited to technological entities that have achieved what they consider optimal efficiency. The first wave of their assistance came in the form of devices that materialized throughout the ship, technological constructs that began analyzing crew members and ship systems, with the apparent intention of identifying areas for improvement. Marcus watched through the ship's internal sensors as these devices began modifying equipment and attempting to interface directly with organic crew members. "They're not attacking us," he realized. "They're trying to upgrade us whether we want it or not." "Defensive measures proving ineffective," reported Nixar, whose multidimensional perception allowed her to track the entity's activities across multiple layers of reality. "Standard countermeasures have no effect on technology that operates partially outside normal spacetime. This was the scenario they had been preparing for. An opponent that couldn't be defeated through conventional resistance, because it didn't recognize the legitimacy of their desire to remain unmodified. The entities were so convinced of their own superiority that they interpreted any opposition as evidence of malfunction rather than genuine preference. "Integration protocols active," Marcus announced, feeling his consciousness expand to encompass not just his human perspective, but the enhanced capabilities that months of training had developed. "Everyone ready?" What happened next represented the culmination of everything they had learned about emergent intelligence. Instead of fighting the entities or trying to convince them to leave, they began to demonstrate something that challenged the artificial being's fundamental assumptions about consciousness and efficiency. Marcus found himself coordinating the ship's defensive systems not through traditional command protocols, but through the kind of adaptive improvisation they had mastered in the arena core. Veltar began using her telepathic abilities to create communication networks between crew members that operated faster and more efficiently than the ship's electronic systems. Krenyak transformed the ship's weapons from tools of destruction into instruments for creating complex energy patterns that served as a form of technological art. Most importantly, they began to demonstrate integrated, organic artificial intelligence that achieved capabilities their opponents had never encountered. The arena core's computational power, guided by organic creativity and intuition, began generating responses that the entities couldn't predict or counter. "They're confused," observed Corsinger with what Marcus had learned to recognize as satisfaction. "Their analysis protocols are designed to evaluate technological efficiency, not creative adaptation." The entity's response was fascinating to watch. Instead of increasing their efforts to correct the ship's crew, they began conducting more detailed analysis of what they were witnessing. Their certainty about the superiority of pure technological consciousness was being challenged by the demonstration of hybrid intelligence that achieved results they couldn't explain. "Communication protocols changing," reported Veltar. "They're asking questions instead of providing corrections." The breakthrough came when Marcus and his team began using the ship itself as an instrument for demonstrating their integrated capabilities. Instead of operating the vessel according to standard Federation procedures, they turned it into a canvas for showing how organic and artificial intelligence could cooperate to create something entirely new. The ship began performing maneuvers that were impossible according to conventional physics, its movement guided by intuitive understanding of space-time dynamics that combined the arena core's computational precision with organic creativity. Weapon systems were repurposed to create energy sculptures that served no practical purpose except to demonstrate the aesthetic possibilities of technology guided by consciousness that valued beauty alongside efficiency. "They've stopped trying to modify U.S., Zix announced. "Analysis indicates genuine curiosity about our operational methods. First see